Hey, welcome in. I'm Rita, and this is the story I'm telling myself. If you've ever felt like you're standing in your own way, you are not alone. Let's get into it. Hello, it is another Tuesday, and we are here live for the recording of the story I'm telling myself, where today we are talking about, are you good enough and ready for that leap, with my good friend, Ellenit Serrano. If you are joining us live, thank you for being here. Jump in the comments, introduce yourself, say hello, and be sure to welcome Ellenit to the show. Ellenit, you're here finally.
I'm so happy to be here. I love how our relationship has evolved since we first met to find us in this moment. Love it.
Yes, yes. Well, before we get into any of that, I want to give you a moment to introduce yourself so everybody can know who you are. Tell them a little bit about yourself, Ellenit.
Sure. So I have spent, I'm an enterprise operator and a workplace well-being strategist who spent the first 30 plus years of her career in the corporate world and in various roles. And then along the way, really found a passion for workplace well-being. And so I ended up kind of bringing all of my skills and passions together. And today I bring that forward to help individuals and organizations redefine success and help them move away from externally determined, let's say, and previously understood measures of success, largely based on performance, to holistic success that is sustainable for the individual as well as the operation. And so that's my focus and my goal these days.
Oh, you speak to my heart, and the sustainability part of that is what is so important,
Yep.
because we are great as human beings at starting things, but
Yep.
oftentimes we are not good at the follow through and the sustaining. And we're going to talk about that today. And that gets into the stories that we tell ourselves. Shireen and Jackie and Gary, thank you for joining us. Thank you for saying hello in the comments. Ellenit would love to connect with you over on LinkedIn, and you can find her there. There's not a lot of Ellenits, so she's a pretty unique name, pretty easy to find. Whoever is joining us from Miami, we can't see your name, but we are so glad to have you with us. Thanks for being here. And of course, this show is for you. So, add your comments, add your questions as we go along. We want to keep the conversation going with you as well. So Ellenit and I met in a very fortuitous moment.
Yep.
We were both attending the World Happiness Summit in London,
Yep.
and we got seated next to one another. Which, the universe always conspires to do beautiful things, doesn't it, Ellenit? We didn't know each other at all, but we very quickly had some engaging activities where we got to know each other a little bit more. And we just quickly realized that we share this common commitment
Mm-hmm.
to the growth and fulfillment of humanity
Yep.
in work. And so Ellen and I have stayed connected throughout that. And so, of course, I wanted to bring her on the show to talk about her leap from a very successful corporate life into the wellness arena, owning that space, setting up her business there, and the internal stories that she had to overcome. So I know thematically we keep coming back these last few episodes to imposter syndrome. And here we are again, sort of getting into that a little bit. But Ellenit, let's start maybe with your background in corporate. Help our listeners understand the life that you were living, and the stories that were rattling around in your head about that corporate life.
Yeah. Well, and if I didn't mention it before, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much, and really excited to bring this story to you and to our listeners. So, my career was a long one. And so as the career evolved, there was a lot of evolution on my part as an individual. So that's why I say I had a lot of stories along the way that led me here. Initially, as a young woman, professional, and then young mom, there was a very great challenge around managing a workload and family commitments and everything around that. There was even, challenges just around the work itself. And my initial part of my career was in finance. There wasn't flexibility at the time. We were, stuck in front of a computer at a desk to finish whatever deadlines needed to be finished. And
Yeah,
so,
most likely in a cubicle
yes, in a cubicle.
until you like earned your way up to an office.
Eventually, I got an office, and then that got taken away.
But yeah, I mean, I find it humorous to remember how we used to just walk through the security
Yes.
and pretend like nothing else existed in the world except for
Yes.
work for
Yes.
8+ hours a day. It's crazy. I know,
Yeah.
kids, it's crazy that anybody can do that, but that was the expectation, and we all
Yes.
fell in line.
Yes. And I think that was the key word, expectation. So I felt very challenged, but in my mind, I said, this is the expectation. I asked for this career. I wanted to work for a large organization. I was in the financial services industry. I worked for American Express for a very long time. And then later in my career, I worked for MasterCard. And what's interesting is that while I had all those challenges, I've always been a hard worker. I was committed to doing a really good job. And so I kept getting opportunities to elevate in my career, and I took them. And of course, with that, the challenges continued. And so
I'm going to pause you there because I think this is an important thing that we need to pause and talk about. And that is, what were the stories that you were carrying internally about who you had to be and what you had to prove at work?
That's an excellent question. And I think my story was, I'm just expected to manage everything that's going around in my life. That's kind of just expected because performance and success is based on me climbing this corporate ladder, right? I went to school, I got my degree, I got an entry-level position in an incredible company. I had the opportunity to continue to get promoted along the way. And there were some really interesting stories there around equity and things like that, maybe for another conversation. But in my mind, I kind of had to deal with whatever stress I was dealing with in order to move forward, because that's what success looked like. And that's what people expected of me. Because what you get is...
And I want to jump in and add to what you're saying from my experience as well. And I want to welcome Leslie. Leslie, you come every week. You're so delightful. Thank you for joining us today from North Carolina. So I agree with everything that you are saying. I started my career in corporate life. And one of the expectations that I felt was that you had to be about performance on the job, and that if you were letting any of your external personal life bleed in, you were toast.
Yes.
There was no space for that. But oh, by the way, in tradition, men climbing the corporate ladder had a wife back at home. I don't know how many times I said to my friends, I just need a wife at home.
Yes. I have a really good friend and leader who used to tell me that all the time. Just like, I just need a wife. And I get it. We had a dual career family, yet for a very long part of the time. And I don't say this, in a negative way, so to speak, but for a long time, probably because I expected myself to do this, I was the one that was, carrying everything over and above the climb. And we know, because we do the research.
There was a whole song about this, right? You remember the song? I can bring home the bacon fried up in a pan, right? Like,
exactly.
Yes, women in the women's liberation movement at the time, we were on a mission to prove that we could do it all, have it all, and be it all.
And, so I guess along the way, I finally rose. The point that I'm going to speak about now is I was a very senior level position. I was the vice president of finance, CFO for one of the divisions for American Express, Latin America. And, my life externally looked incredible, right? I had the job that I wanted. I had a beautiful family, husband, kids, gorgeous home. Externally, the white picket fence, 2.5 kids, all of that was there. And internally, I was really struggling. And I did not know, I was facing burnout, but I didn't even know what that was. Like, there wasn't a word that
There was not a word for that back in
There
the
was
day,
not
girl.
a
There
word.
was not.
There was not a word. There was like, yeah, women have to deal with that stuff. You get all of the messy stuff that you have to deal with along the way. And so I really got to the point where I thought, I just have to like leave my career. I don't know how else I'm going to manage this because nobody's helping me. And I didn't know where to go for help. And so I actually did at one point take a move out of my career for a while. And I learned a lot about myself. And if anybody ever has the opportunity to take a sabbatical or something like that, I strongly, suggest that you do it because I learned, first of all, I got to exhale. And then I really got to assess what were the things that I did not enjoy and that I could no longer sustain. And what were the things that I missed about my, what I had been able to do in my career. So one thing that I love to talk about, especially with young people who kind of, they look at their careers from a different perspective. And a lot of them want to work remotely 100% of the time. And I get it. People need to figure out how they want to work. But I can honestly tell you that my community and my friends at work and all of that social aspect that I had a really good one, thankfully, around really kept me going. So when I was out of balance, right, because there was such a big push and I didn't know how to manage my personal and family and I was so stressed, I had people that I could go to. I had people that I had fun with, even during really long hours or trips away from the family. It kept me really excited about the things that I was doing. So I managed to find that balance. So I realized, when you're on your own, you don't have that. And if you're an extrovert like me, that's really important. And so it gave me a perspective to think about how I wanted to re-enter the corporate world because I decided that's what I wanted to do at the time. And obviously financial reasons always come to play, right? Let's not assume that that's not a major decision maker, right? It is for most of us.
So I want to clarify real quick before you move forward. So you were feeling burnout, although you didn't have a name for it.
Yep.
You exited that role,
Yep.
and then you decided corporate was still the right place for you. So what was the story that you were telling yourself at that point about what you were experiencing?
The story was and this one goes way back. Entrepreneurship is hard for any people that have made the switch. It's hard regardless, but especially if you're switching from a very broad focused strategic role with big challenges and lots of people to come together and collaborate to do them to a much smaller focus where you're wearing many hats. And I did that in my corporate role, but there's a process that you have to go through, in terms of, okay, I have to bring my thinking down to like what's manageable for me until I enable more growth and more scale for myself. So the thoughts that were going through my head were like, I'm not really sure that that I'm ready for this, right? Like a lot of the plans that I was making were bigger than I was prepared to invest in.
Oh, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that you say that because I recognize that in myself as well, and in people that I've coached stepping into that space,
Yes.
especially if you are equating success to the economics side of it. If you're looking at replacing your income,
Yep.
I had a guest earlier in the season, Allison, who talked about her journey as an entrepreneur. And that thing was always pushing against her. Although she had one of the top 5% Etsy shops, her revenue was great in terms of the return and what she could put to the bottom line family budget. She was not on par with what she left in her corporate life.
Yes.
And so that whole conversation is a real head spinner that many people have. I want to just say, hey, Meryl, thank you so much for joining us. Glad to have you here. Hey, Bobby, great for being with us. Leslie said that she had her husband's boss had this burnout thing again in the hospital. It is not just women, by the
No,
way, that experience this.
no,
We've had many speakers at Wahasu who are men that are also
yeah.
experiencing this. But I want to throw this question up real quick before we move on in your story. Leslie asks, do you believe that burnout is relative to each individual?
Yes, I do. Because I think that, and I think we can phrase that question. I can interpret it in several ways. I don't know if you mean based on the level that you can tolerate in terms of intensity in your own body, in your own mind. I tend to think that when we're at a level that's very high stress, we kind of start to normalize it. And, my doctor would ask me, are you stressed? And I'd be like, no, I'm not stressed. Because I was thinking that was my normal level of operation until I stepped back. But when it comes to individually getting to burnout, I think that Rita and I talk about holistic well-being, right? And so while my career may have been thriving and my financials were thriving, my family life was challenging for me because I didn't feel like, maybe I had imposter syndrome for my family life back then, right? I can tell you spiritually, personally, I didn't have an anchor. I didn't have anything to anchor onto. And so right there was two big gaps for me, even though community, financial, and career were strong, right? So that equation looks differently for everyone, and it changes at different times of your life.
I was thinking about that very thing. I was thinking about what so many of millennials are talking about now, about needing to care for parents while they're still raising children. I mean, there's all kinds of dynamics
Yes.
outside of just work that contribute to burnout, because we understand now that this dichotomy that we grew up in corporate, that your work life and your personal life are two separate containers, just does not hold.
Nope. It doesn't.
And so therefore it's really the whole of what you are experiencing that determines where you are and what you can manage. And also, I will say that a lot of this has to do with to what extent your values are being broken.
Yes.
Because that for me really became my breaking point in terms of my burnout in my corporate life. It went after I had my first child, and my husband and I had waited so long to start our family. And then I wanted family time. I wanted to be home to read the book and all of those kinds of things. And so having a corporation, being in a job where they were demanding I take a travel position or I was done, that was crossing a line in terms of the values that I held. Absolutely. And it really made it impossible for me to sustain that level of drive and commitment that I had been giving up to that point, which was pushing me toward burnout. Exactly. I recognize in retrospect, but I was more tolerant of it. So I think there's also a thing about where your personal values come in conflict with the demands.
Absolutely. And tolerance is another good word, right? Because I think it goes back to the question around, do you think burnout is, individual based? And that's a part of it, right? How much can you tolerate? How much of a support system do you have around you? Whether you're a mom or a caregiver in the middle of like parents and kids, some people have both, or any other, challenge that you may have. We all have a number of different needs that are going out in our personal life.
Welcome, Gail. I'm so happy. Gail was a guest last year. I got to get her back to the show again, but she's got a book coming out. But negotiating values, it's a stress point for so many of us, especially when we feel like our values are not being respected.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because my burnout period that I believe kind of started me on my journey, and we talk about the leap, and I think that's where the leap began, even though I was in my corporate career, probably 15 years further, right? That's when I took the leap, because that's when I had awareness, and that's when I went within and I started to understand what it was going to take to make me happy. Right. And I went back into the corporate world, but I went back very differently. Not only did I choose a different career path outside of the field that I had, I really started to do a lot of work with, for me, it was yoga and mindfulness and bringing in tools into my life that helped me manage the chaos that was around me and putting
Now
boundaries.
this is really important. We
Yeah,
got to emphasize this right
yeah,
here
yeah,
because what I love and what is different about your story, Ellenit, and what is so evolved in your thinking in this story is that you recognize this corporate thing wasn't right for you.
yeah,
You walked away, you came back and you said, I still want to do that. But you decided, I've got to be somebody different. You
absolutely.
didn't look for them to change, which is where so many people make the mistake. They're putting all the burden outside of themselves. You went inward and said, how do I need to change? Who
Exactly.
do I need to be? And so your first leap was this awakening of
Yes.
your choices, of your agency, of your being.
Yes, absolutely. And I think from doing that, my career went on an even larger growth trajectory than I had even imagined. Now I went into a trajectory that was kind of like was being built along the way. It wasn't even anything that I had imagined, but it was being built from what I really desired, and it was happening in real time, let's say. And for a long time, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to be out there. I want to be doing something else. No, I was really enjoying what I was doing. And I was adjusting along the way. And I was getting more courageous about being
Mm.
authentic and about being who I am. And, some of that also comes with age and wisdom and experience. But if we can add any of that wisdom to others that may not, have been there yet, that really was a very big differentiator. So when I talk about taking the leap, that leap included changing functional roles, taking on roles I had never done at all, right? And so the story in my head was, why are you asking me to do this? I'm not a marketer. I've never done this. Why are you asking me to do this? Things like that. I had a bunch of different roles that I took on. And along the way, obviously continued to go deeper into the workplace well-being space because now I had realized the benefit. I had seen the benefit that it had done for me. I had seen the need for others. I had networked, I continued to learn, and I realized, wow, this is not something that's just needed for a few. This is something that's needed for many. And if people want to stay healthy and continue to grow in their life as well as in their career, something needs to shift. And so that gave me the courage to start doing something about it, even in the role that I was at. And you might, looking back, I was a vice president at a global level in a very big company, and people might say, oh, well, that that gives you kind of the the platform to do it. But on the contrary, the story I was telling myself was that people are not going to take me seriously if
Oh, yes.
these tools and the need for mindfulness and for some type of nervous system regulation in the midst of the chaos that we had. So that took me a while to get past. And luckily, when I started to just take small steps at incorporating some activities in the workplace, either for myself or garnering funding for other activities, people just started to open up, and say, hey, are you going to do another yoga class? So I'm also a yoga instructor and meditation certified. And they'd ask, hey, are you going to do another yoga class? Or can you come and speak to our team about resilience? People were reaching out, and that was kind of the universe saying to me, okay, you're on purpose here, which is ultimately my ultimate goal is to be on purpose for myself and for others to be on purpose, right? And being on purpose doesn't mean you do 100% of that thing, because I think that's also a bit of confusion today in today's environment. Being on purpose can mean, wow, I have these unusual circumstances around me, and there are things that are beyond my control. Financially, I have to do what I'm doing, or I have to take care for my family, and sick, etc. All of these things. But you can find a few minutes a day to shift your mindset to something that brings that fire back in you. And it's not that fire of performance for somebody else, but that fire that lights you up. And that.
Oh, wait, say that again, because this is a really significant well-being tip. I'm going to call it out right here that Ellenit is dropping for all of us.
Yeah. I don't know how I said it, but instead of getting fired up for someone else and someone else's mission and goal, go within and find what fires you up and tap into that for at least a little bit every day, because that will begin to transform you. First of all, it fuels you beyond those few minutes that you do just that one thing. A lot of times I speak to people, and when they find something that lights them up, suddenly their energy grows. And now they have more energy to do all the other things that were making them crazy, right? But they have the energy to kind of move forward with momentum towards maybe that end goal that they're thinking about. So, for me, ultimately going within and just really understanding where you're at, what matters most to you. It sounds basic, but it's true. What matters most to you across all areas of your life. And then begin to think about, all right, how do I start to tweak that? Where can I make small shifts, micro habits that I can incorporate into my life? And then understand, and we know this because we've studied a lot of the same things, understand that as you go along, you're going to find yourself in a brand new part of the roadmap that may not necessarily look like what you thought it would be. You're still learning, though. You're still got to take with you everything that's happening along the way. Because when you look back, you'll be able to connect the dots and say, oh, I see how that brought me and helped me to get to where I am. But you got to stay nimble and flexible and open and continue to put yourself out there and try. And I strongly believe that when you do that, when you are aware, you're clear, you are open, and you are not afraid to fail to a certain degree, even though we all have that imposter syndrome, afraid to fail, but you got to put yourself out there. You allow yourself to readjust. It's very similar to a lot of what I talk about in my frameworks, obviously because of who I am, is how leadership philosophy is not so different from, the change management that we do at work to a lot of the stuff we learn in yoga and mindfulness around finding steady ground, staying nimble and finding flexibility, being open and finding community. They're all the same basic principles. I think we just have to remembering to come back into ourselves and check ourselves. And if we don't, then find somebody who can help you.
Yes. Well, I want to come back again to a question that Leslie is raising. Isn't it a want to change much more than a need to change? And where I want to connect this into where we are in your story is, so often when people have this awakening, when they find this excitement around well-being, around centering of purpose, of finding themselves, they just want everyone else to experience what they have experienced. And so oftentimes it becomes this sort of force feeding into the organization that then meets resistance, misunderstanding, and ultimately fails to deliver the transformational opportunity that is really present in itself. So based on your experience, because you had this story of like, man, if I go in there and I start talking about this stuff, people are going to be like, she is just too foo-foo and we're not interested and what the hell? And is she really a leader for us anymore? Like, you had all of this self-doubt that's going on. That tempered you, but we are in a different time now where people are much more aware and more willing to talk about these things. How do you light your internal zealousness without letting it overwhelm and overshadow, allowing each person around you to walk their own journey?
That's true. That's a great question. I can say from my personal experience, and that's just based on my history, I tend to, unless I'm doing something like this, and this was also an ask, right? But I tend to speak when I'm asked, like, or go deep into the conversation when I'm asked, rather than just put myself out there and continuously, speak about my thoughts and so forth, because you have no idea who it is that your audience is at that moment. And so maybe I'll put little bits of information. I'll let people know what I'm about. Maybe I'll walk the talk a bit as a leader. I think that's critical, right? I think it's really critical that as leaders, we show up and let people know it's okay to be seen for your whole self. It's okay to recognize that you're being challenged. It's okay to ask questions, right? It's okay to say, I need to go, I need some time, a couple of hours a day, because I have something I have to take care of. So as a leader or a teammate, I think it's important to like start with those little things. But then when I really go at it is if somebody asks me a question. And then I'm like, okay, you asked.
So many companies have embraced the idea of well-being in the workplace, and they bring meditation and mindfulness practices and yoga and things and make them available at work. And then we know what happens. We know people feel stigmatized if they utilize it.
Yeah.
Because they are not performing on their job now. They're off doing that other thing, right? Or they just can't fit it in, like the trying to have a schedule for mindfulness or whatever. Or sometimes there's an app, there's different things, but there's often not the um there's not the pathway to really help people walk into that. I mean, you went seeking, and you
Mhm.
went seeking outside of the workplace. You
Mhm.
found a yoga studio, and
Mhm.
maybe you want to talk a little bit about that as well. But there is this conflict that we
Yes.
are experiencing right now around what does wellness mean, and how do you, as an employer who believes in this, really offer it in a way that makes it truly and genuinely accessible and meaningful for
Yes.
employees.
Yes. This is really important because even though I started off with, kind of building programs around yoga, meditation, and topics, we know that does not address what's happening systemically, right? And so that's what needs to happen. We need to really build well-being into the culture of a company. And so companies can talk about well-being at the top, and maybe they can offer, benefits. You have no idea whether people are utilizing them or not, but offer benefits and offer these stopgap solutions. But what really needs to happen is ownership at every level of the organization, and accountability and measurement. I mean, that's what we're getting to. And that's what those of us that really are ambassadors for well-being hope to be able to drive in the workplace, which is really changing what we're seeing in terms of engagement scores and mental health and, you know, um, isolation, and really building well-being into the culture of the organization, building it into the way organizations and work is designed, right? Teaching leaders a new leadership skill set, which becomes even more important as we think about how technology is really coming into the mix of work, and how our human skills become even more important as we move forward. So um, I think what really needs to happen is that full, I call it like the embodiment. And yes, we can help people, and I can talk a little bit about my path. We can have the yoga classes and allow people the space to come to them, or have a meditation room and allow people the room. But especially leaders, we have a huge workforce at our fingertips when you talk about leadership. The impact we have on the world, not just through those individuals, but everybody that they touch in the workplace or in their homes or in their community, is incredible. Most people will leave their job or are suffering a lot of the frustration they have because of their direct leader. Unfortunately, we've seen that so many times. I know you have an HR background, and so you know this. And so if we could get leaders to kind of change their skill set and really be accountable in a great part for not just the operational and financial performance, but also sustainable operations, which include the well-being of your team and the individuals that work for you, and the evolution of that. And we know that when that happens, there's success, not just for the individuals, but for the organization at large. What needs to happen is a complete shift. For me, going back to, I think what the question was, I somehow found a yoga class. I think that's the most important decision I ever made that shifted my life. I was running on that fire energy, right? The yang. In yoga, we talk about the yin and yang. I was on fire energy all the time. And if people even asked me to take a yoga class, I would say, why? I if I'm going to go to a class, I just need to burn some calories. But I somehow found myself in a yoga class, and it was a performance-based yoga class. So I do all kinds of yoga now, but that one was performance-based. And I couldn't think of anything else for 90 minutes when I was in that class. And when I finished that class, I thought, oh my God, I have finally found the one thing that quieted my mind and kept me away from anybody else. So mind you, at this point, we were already having instant messagings, the cell phones. There were still people using landlines. You know what the culture can be, where you're in a Zoom, but it doesn't matter. You're being texted. Somebody's reaching you on the phone. You've got somebody outside. I mean, it was chaotic. Plus anything going on at home. So I could literally go into a space where your phone was not allowed and just be in that moment for 90 minutes. And that's what got me, moving forward in my journey. And so I just wanted more and more of it. And as I learned more about yoga, I learned more about the philosophy. And then I challenged myself, talking about the stories I tell myself. People would say, well, how could you be a yogi and have this job that you have? So I was the chief of staff for a senior executive globally. Crazy job, right? A lot of fun, but crazy. And they'd say, how could you do this? How could you have this dual life? And I questioned myself. I thought, wow, am I crazy? Like, what am I doing? And I had a very long commute in the mornings. And I started, it all started to connect for me in that commute, how I was able to do what I did because of the practices and beliefs that I had, and how I had changed my belief system, my boundaries, the way I managed myself, right? That then led to the way I managed others. And that's how some of my programs started to come to life, right? When I realized, oh, okay, there is this thing where it's not separate. It's actually very aligned with what it takes to be a leader and what it takes to be an authentic and human-centered leader.
I just want to pause and call out right here, because I think this is also a really critical part of the story. If you're a listener and you're like Ellenit, you have these thoughts, you have these big ideas for yourself that you're not ready to step into yet. You just don't think that you're ready to go there. You're questioning, can I make the leap? Am I ready? Can I step that big? What I love about what Ellenit has done is she's giving you this great tip that you can find ways to start being who you're going to need to be in that future, in the moment that you're in now.
Yep.
You can start practicing and building the capabilities and the capacities that you will need wherever you are right now. And when you shift from that doubt question of, am I ready or not, and start leaning into, I'm getting ready, then you're going to feel a lot of the energy shift that she is talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, passion fuels purpose, and purpose, as we said earlier, fuels, I think, motion forward, right? And then it just becomes, it just keeps driving it forward. So, I guess eventually, I don't know where you want to go from here. Eventually, that purpose grew bigger, on the well-being and leadership side. And I was still learning. I was still being challenged and growing. But I reached a point in my last role where there had been some leadership shifts, some organizational shifts that are normal, right, in a large company. I'm surprised I landed. I stayed through as many as I did, right? And I had the opportunity to actually, because of some changes that had happened, leave the organization instead of looking for another role, and take some time to think about what I wanted to do next. And I had already made a commitment, because it's so hard for us to find the time. But I had already made a commitment that year, it was early 2023, that I was going to dive deeper into the workplace well-being space. And that's when I joined the Global Wellness Institute, which I'm a part of, and I co-chair a committee with a great global group of experts focused on improving the well-being in the workplace around the world. And so I had joined that group, and these changes happened, and I just was able to tap within and know. I just knew this is the time. I think you asked, like, how do you know that you're going to take the leap? In my mind, I wanted a few more years, right? In my mind, I was doing this a few more years. I was having fun. I had another new role that I loved and learned, and then it was, no, I think this is the time to take the leap. And I knew it was right because I had peace with the decision. And I think that made all the, and I had a lot of people questioning me on whether or not, why aren't you looking for another job within the organization? Why aren't you doing everything you can? And I said, I did. And this still seems like the best decision for me at the time. And that's what it took. And then you start and then the process starts all over again.
Right. Absolutely. Well, but we are at time, so we're not going to be able to get into all that. Layla, so thanks for introducing yourself. So happy to have you from Vancouver with us today. But I think we got to really the essential things that we wanted to share. Look, if you were waiting for the perfect moment to make the leap, you will not necessarily find it until you find this space of inner peace within yourself.
Yep.
You do the work within yourself. You start to focus on your being, how you are showing up in the world, visualizing who you need to be in this future. And once you're very clear and you're starting to practice in that, I think, like Ellenit, I believe you will find the peace. You will know when the move is right. And any doubt that you have is not natural. Doubt isn't necessarily the story that should be holding you back. And it's that ability to be real with yourself and in tough conversation with yourself to challenge. Is that story of doubt something that really should be holding me back? Is there good discernment in that doubt? Yes, I've got work to do. Or is it just the inner critic fear that lives in the back of the mind for all of us? Yes. And all of us, the best news is this: all of us are more than capable of navigating that. If not alone, with the help of a really good coach or mentor along the way.
Yep.
Exactly. Ellenit, any parting words you would like to share with listeners who are thinking about this leap or are wanting to elevate their movement in terms of well-being in their lives or their workplace?
Yeah, I think we've already mentioned them, but I would say in chronological order: go within, think holistically about all aspects of your life to understand exactly where it is that you want to find that harmony. Recognize that you're on a journey and the time is going to take whatever the time needs to be, but you are growing as long as you're doing what we just said, which is going within, taking action, because you're very clear, right? And you adjust accordingly. Stay flexible and nimble and open and curious. Meet a lot of people, especially in the areas you want to be. And if it's career focused, that's what I did. I started joining new groups and meeting new people like Rita and diving deep. And you will find your path. And you might be surprised at what it turns out to be. So going back, just to close it off, to the stressed out CFO 20 years ago, that didn't know what was going on and knew I wanted something differently. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be talking well-being, strategy, execution, certified in yoga and meditation, and still bring a lot of that other self with me to the equation, to who I am today and what I offer. So that's why I say, stay open, stay flexible, and understand that you're learning all along the way. And when you look back and you see, you're going to see how all those dots connect.
I love that call out because the visual that I had in my head as you were saying that is, yes, when you're in burnout, and I've been there, it's almost like you're down in a hole. It's like you've fallen into the well and you can see the light above you, but there is so much more sky and opportunity than what you can see while you're stuck in that hole.
Yeah.
So your first job is to climb out of the hole. And until you have emerged, you will not really know all that is possible for your future.
Exactly. Love that.
Well, come back again. Join us Tuesday of next week. My dear friend who is with us in the comments today, Gary Spencer from the UK, is coming. And we're going to have this amazing conversation where we're going to challenge you to think about, are you the architect of your future or the primary obstacle standing in its way? This is going to be a very powerful conversation. Gary's insights just hit me to the core of my being all the time. I love being in conversation with him, and I know that you will enjoy that as well. Thank you for joining us. Make sure that you share this episode with the people in your lives when it is out on Thursday of this week on the podcast channels, because there are plenty of people that need to hear Ellenit's words of wisdom. And we'll see you back here next week. Thank you, Ellenit.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, everyone, for joining and for your incredible questions. Have a great rest of your day.
And make sure you connect with Ellenit on LinkedIn. See you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you love this episode, leave us those 5 stars and be sure to share this with a friend. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. See you back here next week.